Did Vladimir Putin just do what I think he did? Wow. Okay, well, we're going to talk about it right after this. So it's a big day for the Russian Republic. Vladimir Putin just held his threatened ceremony, the ceremony he's been talking about, a ceremony to annex 15% of Ukraine, a neighboring sovereign nation. He has annexed them. Wow, this is incredibly bold. Now, I noticed on Google Trends this morning that millions have flocked to Google to ask this question: what is annexation? Let me just make it really simple. So let's say that I noticed my neighbor's backyard. It's a really great yard, really nice garden. It's well manicured. And I decide I want to have his backyard. Even though it's connected to his house, I want it. So what I do is I go out, I have an argument with him, I throw some rocks at him, he fights back, we have a wrestling match in the yard. It isn't pretty, but basically I quarter off a portion of his yard and I put my own personal flag in it. And then the next morning I have a big neighborhood ceremony to declare that now his yard is my yard and everything in it belongs to me and it's part of my property. That's essentially what Russia just did. They invaded a sovereign country, they're occupying a sliver of that country, and now they have declared that those who live in that sliver are Russian citizens. Wow. I mean, this is such a mess. Now, one of the things that stood out to me from the quotes from this ceremony, they come directly from Vladimir Putin. He said this, he said, in 1991, without asking the will of the ordinary citizens, representatives of the then party elites decided to destroy the USSR. That's the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So he's saying that the elites decided to destroy the USSR, and it wasn't what the average person wanted. He said, and people suddenly found themselves cut off from their motherland. This tore apart and dismembered our nation, becoming a national catastrophe. Well, his view of the dissolving of the USSR is pretty different than the rest of the world, because those who were in the West and farther to the east saw the dissolving of the USSR, the Soviet Socialist Republics Union. We saw that as a big win, a huge advantage for the world, because there were so many restrictions and problems and poverty and destruction and murder. It was a really rough place. Now, for Vladimir Putin, those were the golden years. That was the golden era, apparently. Now, here's what's interesting to me. Later in the speech, he was criticizing the West, which the West, in his mind, is led by the United States. And he said this: now they, which he's talking about the West led by the United States, have moved on entirely to a radical denial of moral norms, religion, and family. Now, that's really interesting to me, that he's complaining about our morality and the fact that our religion is going away, I guess, and that our families are dissolving. Do we have our problems? Absolutely. But it is really interesting to me that he was glorifying the golden era of the USSR, and then he criticizes the United States for the fact that we are denying religion. I mean, the USSR's existence was all about restrictions. It was all about taking away freedoms from the people and having the state tell them what they're supposed to believe, what they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to, how they're supposed to work. And so officially, atheism was the enforced religion of the Soviet Empire. Now, there were some state-sanctioned churches. Some of those were allowed as long as they continued to bolster the indoctrination of the Soviet ideal to the congregants. And so really the only existence of a real church in the Soviet Union were these underground churches, which, by the way, grew in that era, although they were incredible danger for doing so. So, I was thinking it would be really interesting to bring someone on the show that had some experience with the mood and the feeling of Ukraine after the fall of the Soviet Union, because essentially Vladimir Putin is claiming that those who lived in the socialist empire really wanted it to continue, that they loved it, that they wanted it. That is really a marred view of history. So, I'd like to share with you an interview that I did just recently with somebody that's pretty important to me. I want to introduce you to my father, Larry Kitchen. Say hello, Dad.
Hello, everyone.
So, the reason why we wanted to talk to you today, Dad, is because you made a trip to Ukraine pretty soon after the fall of the Soviet Union. The fall of the Soviet Union was 1991. In 93, you went with a group over to Ukraine. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you went to do and how that trip went?
Okay, it was with a group from Philadelphia that had printed quite a few Russian New Testaments, and he came through Kilgore, Texas, and spoke about the need for a group to go and share in the Ukraine. And my wife and I just felt compelled to go, and so 8 people from our church volunteered to go.
Yeah. So what was the mood of the people like? Were they really receptive? Were they really open, or were they closed off and kind of resisted?
Well, very careful, I would say, first of all, to not speak about their government or anything in a negative way that could get them in trouble. I felt like a lot of people that I was speaking to would look left and right to see who was listening.
Wow. Okay.
I noticed there was a TV in their apartment, but they never turned it on. And I asked one time about it, and the mama waved me off, so there's nothing good. And,
oh, wow.
And she also said about just politicians in general that there's no good man in leadership. So I got the feeling that there's a real cynicism and negative attitude toward those that were in power, at least at that time.
Yeah. Now, you guys did meetings, public meetings, though. Tell me about that a little bit.
We actually flew into Kiev first, and then we took a train down to Odessa on the coast on the Black Sea to this smaller town. I mean, it was a huge town, but smaller than Kiev, I suppose. And then to this site where they were trying to build their first small independent church. And I say independent because it was independent from the Russian...
Russian Orthodox Church. Yeah.
And so these independent Protestants were starting, and they had picked out a pastor, and they were actually pouring concrete. They were very excited and had set up meetings for us all over the city to talk to people at their communist centers where they would indoctrinate people over the years. They had turned them to open meetings, and we drew a crowd. I was the one speaking, and they set up many days of the 10 days we were there. They set up 3 meetings a day. So
it sounds like you guys were prepped for doing meetings. When you actually did the meetings, what was the interest? I mean, you guys were Westerners. You had gone through the Cold War as the opponents. Were they standoffish, or were they open to Westerners coming in?
Yeah, if you're wondering about their interest level, it was very high. It was paramount. They were interested in what we thought. They were very eager to know about freedom and about what we believed and how we lived. I was asked one time, could we walk on the grass in the United States?
Wow.
So this person had been shown a sign at a library, don't walk on the grass. And so they've been taught that there's all sorts of strange restrictions in the U.S. And so at the end of every talk, we would walk into these communist centers, these community centers, and there'd be 500 people sitting there quietly waiting for us to walk in, as if we were celebrities. It was
wow.
It was pretty wild. And then we were working through translators to a very eager audience.
So what was the reception like? Like, I mean, you were preaching the gospel. I mean, like, what was their reception to that? Because that would have been really new to them, I would think.
Yeah, it was as if to use a farm metaphor, the pens had been closed for 70 years, and they'd been living in very meager ways, and then suddenly the gates opened and it was fertile soil. And
wow.
So
okay.
I saw a lot of very stoic faces, watching every move I made and every word, wondering if the Holy Spirit was working, if God was moving their hearts. And then at the end, when I would explain how to believe in Christ for eternal salvation, we got responses like you wouldn't believe. At one site, we spoke to the children of Chernobyl who had lung trouble or at this sanitarium, and Laurie had spoken just a simple message about Jesus's life, and then when we said, if you'd like to pray, all 500 stood up and tried to take a step toward Laurie and I.
Wow.
And so I said, oh, well, stay where you are. We'll pray with you.
Yeah, we'll have to do it different.
Along the edge of the room were crying. It was a very touching moment. The ground was fertile, and it seemed they seemed very open and ready to go. They wanted to know Christ and to find out, what should we do?
Yeah.
And in the U.S., I feel like we talk to sort of hardened audiences that have all sorts of worldviews and are not all that receptive many times. But we just had the sense of everywhere we spoke, people were ready to pray and ready to know about Christ and to meet Him and start their spiritual adventure.
I think that probably is going to really bless some of our listeners. So thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you later.
Best of luck with it. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, a big thanks to Larry Kitchen for sharing his thoughts with us today. If you want to see the entirety of that interview, you can get that at freegrace.in, along with lots of other great content. Also, I'd like to say a thanks to our friends out there in the mission field. I know that it's not easy, especially if you're in Eastern Europe right now, but keep at it. We're praying for you. We're looking forward to the great return on the seed that you're sowing in that very fertile ground right now. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll be back with you soon.